The painting you are looking at was created by Caravaggio more than 400 years ago, and yet, just a few years ago, an art historian discovered a detail that the artist had hidden in this basket of fruit, one that would completely change the way we should look at this image. The painting is called The Supper at Emmaus. Caravaggio painted it when he was just 30 years old, and today it is held at the National Gallery in London. But before we talk about this small detail that remained hidden for more than 4 centuries, we need to understand what is happening in this painting. The scene comes directly from the Gospel of Luke. In it, 3 men are seated at a table about to have dinner at an inn when one of them reveals himself to be the risen Christ. The 2 disciples with him had not recognized him until that moment. They had walked with him for hours, they had talked with him along the road, and yet they had not realized it was Christ. Caravaggio freezes the scene right there. At the exact moment when the eyes of those 2 men open and they see what was in front of them all along. Not the miracle itself, but the moment Christ is recognized. When Caravaggio painted this work, he was an artist living and working in Rome, enjoying unrivaled success. But what set him apart from everyone else was not just his technique, but his obsession with reality. His figures are not noble-looking sacred characters or idealized apostles. They are ordinary men with worn clothing, receding hairlines, and the hands of someone who works with them. Caravaggio would paint them directly from real-life models, with no attempt to beautify what he saw, and that deeply scandalized his contemporaries, who expected biblical figures to look worthy of their sacred status. But Caravaggio thought exactly the opposite. His philosophy was that if he wanted the viewer to feel they were witnessing something real, he had to paint real people. And that decision is what makes this painting, more than 4 centuries after it was created, still feel so immediate and so real. Now, if we look carefully at the composition, the first thing we notice is the way Caravaggio handles light. As in almost all his works, there is no visible natural light. Everything comes from a source we cannot see, falling vertically over the figures and cutting them out against the darkness of the background. A 17th century writer named Giovanni Pietro Bellori described how Caravaggio never brought his figures out into daylight, but placed them in the darkness of a closed room, using a light that descended over the principal parts of the bodies while leaving the rest in shadow, in order to create force through the contrast between light and dark. The result is a scene that seems to be taking place in the only illuminated spot in a completely dark world. But there is something else in this composition that goes beyond the light. Caravaggio left the front of the table completely open toward us. There is no barrier between the figures and the viewer, as if there were a 4th seat available and the scene were waiting for us. Caravaggio was very aware that a painting has the potential to transcend the limitations of a static surface, so his intention was not only for us to observe this scene from the outside, but to feel it from within. At the center of the painting, Christ presides over the scene, but there is something unusual about the way Caravaggio painted him. Here, Christ has no beard. He is young, rosy-cheeked, and his face projects a completely serene expression as he blesses the bread with one hand and extends the other toward us. That absence of a beard is a deliberate reference to his transformed form after the resurrection, a body that is no longer exactly the same one that was crucified 3 days before, so transformed that 2 of his closest disciples walked with him for hours without recognizing him. Another important detail is that behind Christ, a strange shadow falls on the wall. Some historians have interpreted it as the silhouette of another presence in the room, something we cannot see, but that is there. Let me know in the comments if you can also see any message in that shadow. On his left, the disciple identified as Cleophas, Christ's paternal uncle according to some sources, rises from his chair with sharp elbows poking through the worn sleeves of his coat. His gesture is one of panic and astonishment at the same time. And on the right, Luke stretches his arms out in a posture that, if we look carefully, mirrors the same shape of the cross on which Christ was crucified 3 days before. We do not know whether Caravaggio did this consciously, but it is hard not to see it once you notice it. And finally, beside Christ stands the innkeeper, the man hears the same words as the disciples. He is in the same room, under the same light, and yet he understands absolutely nothing of what is happening. That difference between those who see and those who do not is the heart of the entire painting. And now we arrive at the detail that no one noticed for more than 400 years. At the edge of the table, right in front of us, there is a wicker basket full of fruit. Caravaggio placed it using a trompe-l'oeil technique that creates the illusion that the basket is jutting out of the canvas into our space, as if it were about to fall and spill its contents into our reality. It is his way of telling us that this scene is not happening behind a painting, but right here, with us. But what is inside the basket also matters. In it, there is an apple that has begun to rot, a symbol of temptation and the fall of man. There are grapes representing the Eucharistic wine, the blood of Christ. There are figs, pomegranates, and quinces, each fruit carrying a meaning that viewers in Caravaggio's time would have recognized immediately. But if we look very carefully at the fraying in the weave of the basket, we can see a loose twig sticking out of the pattern, and that twig forms, together with another curve going in the opposite direction, the silhouette of a fish. This silhouette is the ichthys, the fish symbol that early Christians used in secret to recognize one another during times of persecution. It is said that one of them would draw half of the curve on the ground and wait for the other to complete it. If they did, both knew they were among friends. If they did not, nothing had happened. Caravaggio deliberately built this symbol into the weave of this basket, illuminating one of the curves with light and leaving the other in shadow, exactly as those early Christians would trace only half of the symbol. But there is something more. If we look at the shadow the basket casts on the white tablecloth, we can see that shadow also takes the shape of a fish, with a crescent-shaped tail fin that seems to move toward the basket. So Caravaggio did not hide one symbol in this painting. He actually hid two, one in the light and one in the shadow. What is most fascinating about this discovery is not just that the symbol is there, it is what it tells us about Caravaggio's intention. But before we continue, I just want to quickly remind you that if you would like to have this painting in your collection, you can now purchase it directly from our catalogue. In the link in the description, you will find more than 900 carefully selected historical paintings for you to choose your favorites and begin your own art collection. Shipping is free worldwide, and by purchasing from the store, you will be supporting me enormously in continuing to create videos like this every week. 5 years after finishing this version, Caravaggio painted a second version of the Supper at Emmaus, which today is held in Milan, and in this second version, the basket of fruit has disappeared. In this version, there is no trompe-l'oeil, no hidden symbol. He also removes the invitation for the viewer to sit at the table. The shadows have thickened into something almost oppressive, and the scene no longer seems to want to connect with us, but rather to push us away. In those 5 years, something changed in Caravaggio. Legal troubles, fights, a life growing increasingly dark that would end with his death in 1610 under circumstances that are still not entirely clear. Between one painting and the other, he seems to have seen his paintings less and less as mystical spaces where others could find their souls, and more as a projection of the growing darkness in which his own soul was becoming consumed. Thank you for watching the video until the end. I would love for you to leave me in the comments whether you were aware of this detail before watching this video, and to share your thoughts on why you think Caravaggio removed it in his second version. See you in the next video.